Chuck Edel, Chuck E. Cheese, Chuck Money. Chuck, you there?
I'm here, Johnny. How you doing?
I am good, sir. Real quick, is we're gonna have it up on the screen. A couple people always say we watch every webinar. We don't need to keep getting the bio of every single person, so I'm gonna skim through it. Chuck is someone who is more of a professional bettor versus someone who is in the handicapping for sale business. He does do both. He's a Las Vegas local, and he is somebody who makes most of his money in the actual betting arena and takes his information, and the secondary income comes from selling picks. So what we're going to do is there's a couple things Chuck wants to talk about, and then from there we're going to get into the Q&A. If you do want to ask a question, you could use the pop-up module to ask Chuck. Right now we have about 8 in queue. We're going to end this exactly at 9 o'clock, so if you have a question, I would get that to me as soon as possible. So there's a couple things that Chuck wanted to talk about, so I'm going to go one by one, let Chuck go. If there's anything that I need to jump in and have an opinion on, I'll be quick, and then we'll go to the next one. So the first thing Chuck wanted to discuss was the difference in handicapping college and NFL football. Chuck, the floor is yours.
Well, obviously, there's a lot of variables in the college football that you don't have in the NFL. New players coming in all the time, players graduating, coaching. The coaching situations are always changing in college football. So there's a lot to it. Sometimes injuries don't play as big as a role as people think they do in college football, where in the NFL a key player gets hurt. It's huge sometimes. Sometimes in the college football, a running back gets hurt. Well, they have 6 running backs behind this kid that are all pretty much a lot more similar in talent than maybe you would get in the NFL. So there's a lot of it really is schedule dynamics in college football. And you're playing a Rice, and then the next week you're playing in Alabama. Obviously, there's opportunities to maybe look past certain games with certain teams. So definitely a lot of different situations, NFL and college.
One of the things you also want to talk about was in college, second-year coaches, returning players, etc. Is there anything specific when you see that team with a second-year coach? And for me, I would love to hear the specific example of when Rich Rod in his second year in Michigan, did you handicap that different than you did the first? And then feel free to go as generic as you want on that topic of things that an amateur handicapper should look for.
This is a major thing for me here, especially, and we'll talk about some of the under-overs here that are posted here in Vegas and all in the offshore world on all these teams. But what I look for, a lot of times, each situation is different, but I look for a second-year coach who came into the system in his first year as a coach, and changed the whole system. Maybe a passing coach came into, you could use the Rich Rod a little bit. He came into a Michigan. He took over a Michigan team that he didn't have any players at all that were suited to his system. I mean, it was that's probably as good as example as I could give. So the whole system was different. So those coaches, I look to go against the first year. When a coach comes in, and I'll give an example this year. I mean, this guy from Wisconsin, who I wasn't very high on to begin with, now he's going over to Arkansas, Belima. He's going to take over Arkansas. He's changing things around a little bit there. I mean, we know Arkansas has been a pass-happy team over the years. You're going to see them run the ball a lot more and try to play a little more physical. So, I mean, that's a team that I'm looking to go under on and maybe look to fade here early on in the season, depending on the situation. But on the other hand, I look to go with coaches in the second year who look for improvement. For example, they took over a team. Maybe they changed it around a little bit, or maybe it was a complete change around. Now their second year, those schools are going to be much more familiar with the system. And you brought up the Rich Rod thing. Even in his second year, he still didn't have his players there, so that was a total debacle. But there's a lot of coaches who take over, they change the system and not completely overhaul it. And then in the second year, I look for a big improvement. And if you want, I could read off some of the teams that I played over this year with second-year coaches. It's not automatic, but obviously you got to look at each individual situation. If you want, Johnny, I can ramble
Chuck, you
off.
had me at hello. I mean, these people aren't here to listen to me babble. They want to hear some shit from you. So you go on as much as you want, kid. This is your show. I'm just here to hold the microphone.
All right, well, we're getting ready for you out here in Vegas, too, so it won't be long. And here, a few teams I did play over this year, and I expect to possibly play on them here, depending on the situation. But Hugh Freeze, second year over there in Mississippi. This is a team I really have high expectations for. Already played them in the first game against Vandy, have them over for the season. I expect them to improve a lot. Penn State with O'Brien, who did such a great job last year. Things are going to be a lot more, football oriented over there. I expect them to even get better with O'Brien there. Illinois with Beckman had a horrible year last year. He really changed. That was a team to fade last year, but he really, that was a coach coming from the MAC conference. He overhauled that team. So that was a good team to maybe look to go against early on last year, made us a lot of money. But this year, I think, second year there in the system, got some of his players, got some JUCO transfers. I think Illinois will be a dog in a lot of those games. You might want to take a look at them. Also, Weiss over there at Kansas, a little scary with Weiss over there, but he did overhaul that system. Should be a little more improved this year. Fedora over at North Carolina. I'm looking to play them. Leach over at Washington State. So I think, there's been a lot of said about Leach, but he's a great, great offensive mind. He completely, changed a lot of things over there. I think that's one to look at. And then a couple obvious ones that probably a little bit late to the dance here if you're looking to play totals on. But Arizona State with Graham, who came over from Pittsburgh. And then, of course, your man Rich Rod over there, or he was over there in Michigan, now at Arizona with a lot more of his style type players there. I think they'll be good this year, improve this year as well.
It's my webinar, and I can do what I want, so I'm going to jump in. And I got a question in case we run out of time. Sorry, everyone who's in queue. What are your thoughts? One, what do you think my Michigan Wolverines are going to do this year? And one thing that I've heard from a couple people that I respect is they feel that Ohio State, it's hard to say overrated when they still have them, to have a solid year. But they think they're going to have a couple losses this year, and they're not going to be, that lock to coast through the Big Ten like the media is predicting. So first question from me before we move on to stuff you want to talk about, and everyone could just suck it who's listening, is one, what do you think is going to happen this season with my Michigan Wolverines? And two, what do you think is going to happen with Ohio State? Is some of the stuff that I'm hearing outside of the media from guys that bet for a living to they might be a goal-against team?
Yeah, it is Urban Meyer, and it is his second year there. It wasn't one that you notice. It's not one of the ones that I mentioned over there as far as that goes. Last year they benefited, I think, from a pretty soft schedule. I mean, they're going to be good, but he had no question. I think they could have, they could be a drop overrated. A lot of people, put a pretty high number on them. And as far as Michigan, I think they're going to be, they're pretty steady. I mean, a lot of people are calling them maybe second or third, in that side of the division. But I like Gardner as a quarterback there. Once, last year was kind of, with Robinson and then coming in and out, and Gardner coming in and some different scenarios. But I'm a big fan of your coach, Hoke over there. I mean, it's his third year. He's definitely getting a lot of his players in there. And it might not be that same Michigan team, Johnny, that overpowers everybody that we're used to seeing, but I would expect them to be a little bit improved here this year. I mean, last year, 8-5, I thought was a little bit of a, for some other teams that might be good, but Michigan fans, 8-5 is not a good record.
Oh, for sure. I was excited when you sent me this one, is how to break down box scores of games. To me, this is something, it goes back to the old school, reading the Power Sweep, getting the newspaper, before there's these databases and just godly amounts of information, almost like information overload with the internet and computers and iPads. I mean, I've been prepping for my fantasy leagues. I downloaded a couple apps, and just information, it's just overwhelming. So it kind of, I'm only 38, but it made me reminisce to a time of calling on the rotary phone and getting a busy signal, of using the newspaper as your primary way to handicap games. So you sent me this and you want to talk about, so I'm interested here, how to break down box scores of games.
Yeah, and this is a lot of, obviously when we're talking all the games that go on in college football, I mean, you're not going to be able to watch every game, but, the final scores could be very deceiving, as we know, and sometimes, even the line makers, they'll look at certain stats and stuff, but sometimes those final scores early on, especially, Johnny, in the season, could have a bigger impact on the line than it should. And, so, there's so many things that go on. I mean, obviously, you want to, you look at a lot of, yards per play and the defensively yards per play given up. A lot of, you also look for a lot of junk yards. I mean, if a team's down 44-0, and they're getting outgained 360 to 120, and then at the end of the game it ends up being 440 to 360. It looks like, well, they played pretty close yardage-wise, but the fact is they did that against the other team's second or third string and put up a bunch of junk yards. And so those are some of the things you look at. It obviously turnovers plays a huge role, and the team could easily outgain a team and kind of dominate the game. But if they shoot themselves in the foot and turn the ball over a lot, they could end up losing a game. Now so that's something you want to look at throughout the year, because sometimes if teams are thrown in turnovers, then you got to throw that in the mix. But sometimes if it's just a random game where they happen to have turnovers, and so early on in the year they might get line-wise, it might not be built into the line totally. You might get a little value there. But you want to look at the quarterback situation, how he played in the game. You like to look at one stat, and you mentioned, Johnny, with the computer, you could see there's certain places you could go to. You could see not only how many times the quarterback got sacked, but how many times he got hit. How many times the defense was able to put pressure on that quarterback, because that can play a big role in certain situations. If a quarterback who offensive line has been letting him get hit a lot, even though you look in the box score, you see one sack, but meanwhile he was rushed, forced to throw the ball quickly 8 times, or maybe he holds on to the ball. College especially, you find quarterbacks who hang on to the ball way too long, and then you see them get sacked, and people blame the offensive line. A lot of times it's the quarterback holding on to the ball. So those are things, and you look for those matchups, teams who put pressure on the quarterback, and but there I could talk for a long time about going through the box scores, but you want to see rushing yards. I mean, obviously nowadays we see all these pass happy teams, but it's very important to be able to establish a running game, and it's also very important to be able to stop a running game. So you look for those stats. I mean, if a team, first couple of weeks you could say, wow, this team's averaging 6.4 yards a carry. I mean, rushing the ball. Well, then you delve into the box score. Well, the guy ran an 89-yard touchdown, and besides that, they were only averaging 3.2 yards. So that could be deceiving. So you got to look through all, really dissect all the box scores, and it could give you a big edge, especially early on, first 4 or 5 games of the year.
That's one of the things that I did, and it almost seems like old school, saying writing on paper. But, I have TVs down here in my office, and I watch a lot of, the obscure games, the shitty Big Ten games that are on at noon. And a lot of times, like you said, it is something you won't see. To me, it's like even a step further is watching a lot of these games and picking up things where it's just going to be based off the final score. And I know there was a lot of times in those shittier Big Ten games, you'd see the team go all the way down the field, and it would be a stupid penalty, and they'd have like a 1st and 20. And the way they're, conservative offenses, it kind of throws them off their game plan. You'd have to assume that the week going into the next week, that coach, they're going to focus on those mistakes they made in the red zone. But if you're just looking at a final score, you may think, oh, this team got smoked. They lost by, 17 or 21. But if you watch the game, they could easily win it outright. Sometimes, like you said, whether it's the box score or physically watching it, those final scores could be really, really misleading. Here's another one you brought up that I think is real interesting. Scheduling situations. I'd love to hear your thoughts on scheduling situations.
Well, that's, kind of a semi-basic thing. Certain teams, and you could look, some of these magazines, I mean, you could go back and you could look past 5 or past 10 years, their spread, it shows their schedule, how they do against the spread. And that's one of, I don't pay a lot of attention to the stuff that's written in some of these magazines. Some of it's very good, but so much of it changes from the time the magazine's published to the time the season starts. So you use that maybe, but don't get stuck on that. I know a lot of people just get stuck looking at sometimes magazine publications, which it only can help you, but you want to dig a little deeper. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because certain coaches or certain teams and certain scheduling spots have always kind of fallen a little bit flat. I mean, for example, you look at Michigan before Ohio State. Now they haven't been one of the teams who's fallen flat the week before Ohio State, but when you have a big game, maybe you're coming off of a big game, and then you have coming off of a big game, and you just won a big game, so maybe they're not totally as focused for that next team, especially a weaker opponent. Also, teams that are the one thing that's really worked well, we call it the hangover effect, is like a team who's supposed to be maybe undefeated or can be maybe in the national championship, one of the teams favored, has a chance. They lose again. Say they win the first 6 games and they lose, they get upset. By that next game, it's been a good goal against that team who loses, to kind of blow their season. A lot of times they just have trouble getting motivated for the next game. So, those are things to look at. But obviously, you look for sandwich spots. I'll just use your Michigan for an example. They're playing, one week they're playing Michigan State, the next week they're playing Akron, the week after they're playing Ohio State, for example. Well, that's a pretty novice type of sandwich spot there. That's kind of a common one where you look at maybe they're coming off a big game and they got a big game coming up, and now all of a sudden they got a weaker opponent. So sometimes the team can be flat for that. And then I also like to look at teams who maybe a team who has a bye the week before, playing the team who's coming off of a game. Sometimes, especially later in the year, it's a big edge when you could have a bye in college football to get ready for that team. Meanwhile, the team played had a tough game maybe that week before. So you got those are certain scheduling dynamics to look at.
Yeah, to me, that's one of the things that I tend to do. It's funny you say that, is I use that theory going into the bowl games. And, one of my big goal against this year was, teams like USC, the real marquee teams. You get a lot of those, no offense to my California friends, a lot of those cocky California kids who go to those premier schools are playing for the mighty USC. They predict to win it all. They have a couple losses, and all of a sudden they're playing some bullshit school, on, the 28th of December or so. It's not even a New Year's Day game. And early in the year, they picked them in Alabama or a coin flip to win the national title. I love looking at teams that end up in bowl games that are not what they really anticipated or had any idea that they were going to be playing in. They thought they were going to be playing in the Rose Bowl or the national title or New Year's Day. Now they're playing in the Who Gives a Shit Bowl versus some MAC school. And to me, those are things that I like to tend to look for in the bowl season. So it's interesting you say that. Before we get to the questions, go ahead, Chuck.
I was just going to say I agree with you 100% on that. I mean, USC is a great example. Last year they lost 21-7, a lousy Georgia Tech team in the Sun Bowl. So those are great spots, there's no question.
Yeah, that was actually my bowl game of the year was Oregon over K-State, but that was one of my second biggest plays. I loved fading USC in that spot. We have about 7 or 8 questions, and then I still want to get to some specials we're going to offer for everyone who's listening now and who's going to listen in the next 24 hours in archive. So before we move on to the question, Chuck, is there anything else in regards to football season, live wagering, halftime betting, line shopping, anything that in the top of your head, without giving away too much of your inner secrets, you think is worth sharing? That you'd want someone who's listening this to taking the time to, listen to me babble and listen to your information to walk away and think that they walked away, getting something that was really valuable.
Well, line shopping's huge. I mean, football. I mean, you want to get the best number. I mean, there's no question. So line shopping's really important. I mean, if you think, if you're doesn't matter what, if you're $100 player and you lose 10 games instead of winning 10 games over a course of a football season between college and NFL because you got a bad number and so you lost when a sharp guy might have won the same game and he got a +3, you got a +2. That's if you're a $100 player, that's a $2,000. It's a $2,000 swing. So I mean, it's huge to get the best number and depending on everybody's situation is different. You might have one local guy and know what then maybe you just got to try to. If you like something or you feel, you keep an eye on things, maybe you play that earlier in the week. If you have more outs, then, obviously your options are better of getting the best number. But, that's one thing that you can never repeat too many times, Johnny. You try, you do your damnedest to get that best number because over a long season, it sure does pay off.
Yeah, and to me, it reminds me of poker. Is a lot of times when you'll hear somebody talk poker, they just say, oh, it was a bad beat, this happened. They never say it was in the pot where they were sitting, anything along those lines. And in sports, sometimes you'll hear, to me, I love Michigan against Ohio State. Then there's I love Michigan getting up to, as long as they're at least getting 3.5. After that, I don't know. You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah,
one of
sure.
the things you see the biggest mistake is when you're at the bar with your friends, or even in the forums you'll see it, is people will say, or say for example, your game goes off and so, oh, Chuck loves so-and-so. It's like, no, Chuck likes so-and-so up to so many, the game closed this, and so it wasn't a play anymore. And then in Fezzik, his last couple preseason releases he's put up, he's had to pull him down. And if this was the old days of the business, those would have stayed up because he would have made money on them. But to him, the value was gone. And once you don't understand the numbers and the value, you're the reason that, people like me, when I used to take action back in the day, used to drive a really nice car. So we got a bunch of questions. First one, Chuck, is it easier to win in the NFL or college football?
Me personally, and if you ask a lot of associates in the business or people in the business, they're going to tell you college football. I mean, there's NFL's tougher than college football. You got a lot of more teams in college football. NFL, they're a lot closer. I mean, there's good spots in NFL, but I mean, if you're going to give me one, if you told me I could only bet one, I mean, I wouldn't even think twice. It'd be college football.
I actually had a debate with a friend one time with this, and what I told him is I said, I will bet you any amount of money within reason. Clearly, neither of us was putting up $1 million. That because he was on the NFL side being easier, and I was on the college. And I said, all you have to do, I mean, Stevie Wonder could see it, is just look at the opening and the closing. NFL games, the movement is there, but it's not like college. I mean, you'll see a game at -14 close, -11, -10, a total move 3-4 points. In the NFL, the only time you see a major line movement is if there's some kind of injury or extreme weather condition that, comes out once the line is established. And you look at college football totals of the games, I mean, it's a crapshoot from that opener to the closer. And to me, that just shows you right there, if the market's going to fluctuate that much and there's that much of a variance between the opening and closing, as I said starting, Stevie Wonder could see which one has more value.
Yeah, no question.
I listened to the webinar with Johnny and VR, and VR was really high in New Orleans to win the Super Bowl. Chuck, I'd love to get your thoughts on how you feel the Saints will do this season.
Yeah, he's not alone there, and obviously with Peyton back, kind of more, last year. Let's face it, that team was, before the season started, there was guys who were suspended, guys didn't know if they were going to be suspended. They were appealing. The coach was gone. Then the guy who was supposed to take over as coach, he was suspended. So, this is a good Saints team. Now, this year they are missing, their wide receivers are a little bit of a weaker position for them than it has been in the past. But obviously with Drew Brees and Peyton there on the sidelines, I mean, it's going to be an improved team. There's no question about it. I mean, this is a total, they're total, they're for the win total opening up at 9 this year. You see it now like 9. They're afraid that some of the places haven't changed it to 9.5. Some have, but the places that haven't changed it are going like 9 over minus $1.80. So there has been a lot of money coming in the Saints, and it could be a decent price for the Super Bowl.
Next question. People always talk about teasing. I've always heard that you could tease the NFL, but you should stay away in college. Chuck, I'd love to get your thoughts. Is there any situation in college football that's worth teasing?
No, not for me. I mean, here's the thing with college. I mean, sometimes in a bowl game or something, but here's the thing. It makes it real simple. I never tease in college football. In NFL, 2-team teasers there's some value, and the reason that is because NFL, the scores are so much closer to what the line is. Okay, college football, we see a way bigger disparity. Teams are favored by 6, they win by 26. The NFL, the games fall so much closer to the number than in the college. And many days, you could sometimes go down a Sunday afternoon and both teams, no matter which one you took, cover the teaser, and you might be able to find 7-8 games that might fall in that category, on like a 7-point teaser. So NFL, the games, a point in the NFL, if you see if a college line moves from 4 to 5, or that's not a key number, but a key number, 3, 4, 6, 7, 10 NFL are key numbers. So you see a line in college football go from 9 to 10, or you see NFL 9 to 10. The point means a lot more in the NFL than it does in college, in my opinion. Much, much more, and so it's even more important to get the better number in NFL games.
Yeah, I've ran tons of queries and numbers, and I'm in 100% agreement. As I always tell people, there's nothing you could tell me ever really to tease college football. The only thing, I guess you'd say exotic-wise that has value is if you could find a local or an offshore that, will let you bet the correlation from the spread into the total. What is it usually, a third or 33? I mean, it depends on the book. Some books take it a little higher, some go a little lower. If you can find a local that doesn't know any better and they're going to let you bet a team minus 28 and over 52 kind of thing, there's an exotic you could do. But in terms of teasing, I agree 100% with Chuck to stay away.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I will say real quick, a lot of pros out here do 2-team teasers. You're not 3 teams or 4 teams, but NFL 2-team teasers. And over the years, Johnny, we've seen the juice get, we're starting to get screwed by some of these places, and there's a reason, because they've been getting screwed. The juice is getting a little higher and a little higher on those 2-team teasers, but still there's a lot of, there could be some value in those, especially, if you go through key numbers, if you got a teaser plus, a team that's plus 3 or something, or 3.5, now you can get them plus 10, so you go through the 4, you go through the 6, you go through the 7, and now 10. Now you got all those key numbers, those 4, 6, 7, you got all those on a teaser. A lot of guys look for those situations teasers.
This was a funny one. Chuck, are you banned from betting at any Las Vegas sports books?
Yes.
All right, now I'm going to ask the second part. Which one?
It's probably the obvious one, and I shouldn't say I'm banned. I'm banned from. I can't bet on it. They won't let me bet on their phone accounts at the station casinos. They took that away from me, but I could go in there, and there's. Without getting in detail, sometimes, there was a time when you only could bet there once a day. They only allow you to bet once a day. Like, I couldn't go there and bet and then come back an hour later and bet again. I mean, that's changed a little bit, without going into too much detail. But I can't get the phone. They took my phone account away. They won't give that back to me.
All right, next question.
And I'm not, I don't want to, gloat about it, because there's a lot of, it's happened to, a number. I mean, it's not just me that, unfortunately.
Right.
That they do business that way, and there's a number of people out there that are sharp that they've done it to.
Next question. Chuck, do you avoid betting minus 2.5, minus 20, and wait for minus 3, or do you recommend we pay the higher vig?
Well, I'd rather have minus 2.5, minus 20, because if it goes up to 3, you want to buy it down to 2.5, it might cost you 25 cents, or depending on your book. But I'd rather have in NFL especially, NFL, I'll take minus 2.5, minus 20 all day long.
Next one, Chuck.
Overtaking the 3. Yep.
How did you start out, and can we get a glimpse behind the curtain on a sports book on a typical football weekend? I don't know if you can answer the second part, because I don't know if you know how.
I didn't even understand it. Say it again. I just heard something.
Well, that's a 2-part question. The first one is, how did you get started in this business, Chuck?
I used to be, a long time ago, probably like you, Johnny. I was on the other side. I was on the other side of things. I mean, I was, involved with somebody who's taking the action. So so it enlightened me that the obvious plays were like the 2 obvious of plays. The first thing I learned in being on that side is, if something looks too good to be true, it is. I mean, if a team, if the New England Patriots are playing Tampa at home and they're minus 2.5, Tampa's probably the right side.
Right.
This is what I learned, because all the Joe Schmoes were betting New England like they thought they were giving away money, and then they win by 1 and they cry about it. But that was the first thing that kind of enlightened me to stay away from those trap games. Especially, it's not even as bad now as it used to be. Worse, those situations, but that's how I got started, by looking for those situations to go against the public. I was always looking to go against the public. When I first started betting, those were all my spots when I first started. I've, expanded since then, but that's what I used to do.
Next question. NFL Week 1, Green Bay at San Francisco, Lions 3.5. Do you have any opinion and thoughts on this game?
Here are my thoughts on that game. I think power number wise, it's pretty much right, but I think the Lions are going to go up. So it's funny, we talked about it a week ago. I was talking to somebody about this scenario. I guess I'll say it. He might be pissed, but I don't think it's going to change anything. If you take San Francisco, and the line was too high really to begin with, but because of what's going on in the preseason and injuries and everything going on, if you take San Francisco right now, minus there's some 4s out there, or 4.5s, I think the line's going to go up, and you might even get a situation, depending how things kind of roll out, you might be able to get a situation, maybe you take back a +6. But as far as the game, I would only look at Green Bay small, but I think there's going to be a lot of public money on the 49ers, and right now, if you grab a 4.5 or a 4, I think it's going to set you up nicely for maybe a 6 on the back end.
Thanks for the freebie there, Chuck. New question. Johnny talked about correlated parlays. Are there any other examples of correlations that you use outside of the obvious score into total?
Is there any other correlated parlays that I make besides?
I think what they're saying is other type of correlations. Like, for example, I understand where this question is going. Is I think it wasn't. I don't know. If it was
side and total correlate. There is some situations where you play. There is certain situations where you play a team with a total and a correlated parlay. There is definitely those situations that occur throughout the year.
I know late in the season, ones I've heard people do is if you like, say for example, when the playoffs and all that gets decided, is if you like Cincinnati, say at the 1:00 game to win and cover, if Cincinnati wins, so-and-so's out of the playoffs, so then you automatically would take the other team against that team with the current line, because once Cincinnati game's over, the games have come off the board, the line gets readjusted. I've seen people where you try correlating one into the other, or, if so-and-so wins this game, the other one, has no shot at a bowl game. Is there any type of correlations, Chuck, outside of, the scores that maybe you look at in terms of either scheduling or anything else, or we kind of just covered it all?
Yeah, I think besides like the side going into it totally. Now, I will say a correlated parlay, sometimes even first halves could be a good correlated parlay, depending on the situation. But, what you say, obviously, once the game starts, there's a reason why they take off those games off the board in those situations late in the season. If this team wins, that means it knocks this team out of the playoffs. So you bring up a good point, because obviously they don't even let you bet on the game. But, if that team doesn't win, now you're sitting on the wrong side of a parlay. So I guess it works both ways.
Who's your pick to win the BCS National Championship? And if you choose Alabama, who are some teams with good value?
That's a good question. There's Alabama, especially. We'll see how this whole situation kind of rolls out here with Johnny Football here, but their road could be even a little easier. But Alabama is a huge favorite, and for a good reason. They're going to be a tough one to beat. I took a flyer on a big, crazy one. Just for some value. I found not too long ago 200 to 1 on Arizona State to win the national championship. Do I think they're going to win? No, but at 200 to 1, I thought it was a really good bet. I think Ohio State's. Here's the thing with Ohio State. I don't think they're good enough to win the championship. They have an easy schedule. They have an easy path. But at like 5 or 6 to 1, I don't think it's a good bet. So I would probably stay away from that. But boy, the field, really opens up after Alabama. Louisville. There's certain teams that might not be really the better teams, but you look for teams who are going to have an easy road like Louisville. I don't know if they're going to depending, if they could go undefeated and some of these bigger teams all have 1 or 2 losses, all of a sudden Louisville is in a game they don't really belong in, but they're in the national championship. So it doesn't mean I think they're the second best team, but there is spots like that are going to happen. But I don't know who else. I would say Clemson, maybe maybe a decent shot or Georgia, maybe even a couple of decent shots.
I'm going to take that question to another level because I'm just curious in your thoughts on this. So say you have we'll start with the first one, your Arizona State at 200-1, and then, some of your other teams a little bit higher. What happens if they're in that title game against Alabama? How would you hedge? And I'm not a big fan of hedging unless, to me, it's like serious money. I mean, because if you constantly are hedging out and you're taking futures and, you're taking a 5-team parlay, you're constantly hedging out, you're defeating the whole purpose of taking these exotic bets to get the crazy payoffs anyways. And the book's probably like, nice. Every time this guy gets lucky and he's going to hit his parlay, he's like, pusses out and says, okay, just give me chump change. So I only like to hedge if the year that we won the Hilton, I hedged a little bit. I had, actually, the funny thing is it was the year that the Giants beat New England. Jimmy V, this was earlier in the season too, and they weren't like really doing too ecstatic, said that his long shot was the Giants to win the Super Bowl. And I remember I put a couple thousand on them and got real good odds. And, I hedged out and took New England on the money line, which when they didn't score at the end, when what's-his-face dropped that pass, I fucking almost vomited right there because I would have just made a killing. Probably would have quit pregame and moved somewhere with the old lady. But so my question is this, so you have a couple of these, bets. You said you took the one at 200-1. Grace of God, they're in the title game. What's your angle?
I mean, I agree with a lot of what you have. First, I do agree. I mean, people, they think if you got a good number on a game, why hedge it? I see people, the line's up to 7, should I buy some back? Why? You have -4. If you like the bet, you got a great number. But but this situation, I got a lot of gamble in me, but I'm also got a little smart, I would say conservative. I mean, I didn't put that much on there, but if I'm going to, make $40,000, if Arizona State wins the national championship. Now, obviously, I'm going to have to bet at money line, so it all depends on, what I'm going to have to lay. I mean, obviously, the perfect scenario, Arizona State's favorite in the game, and I think the other team plus the points and try to win them both. But I don't think that's going to happen. But but other than that, if they're the dog, if it's Alabama and Arizona State, then I'm going to have to most likely look money line. So it all depends on, but I probably would hedge a little bit on that.
Okay, that's my fair. I knew you weren't a pussy doing if you had a 2-team parlay going, you hit your first leg to hedge. But okay, the 200-1.
Here's the thing. I mean, if you need, everybody's situation is different. I never do that. But if there's a guy out there who has a 2-team parlay and it comes down to the Sunday night game and maybe he's short on some money, he wants to guarantee he's going to have some money. I can't fault the guy. I mean, if you're going to do this for a living, you can't do that. But if it means you got to
exactly,
you have some money to buy some beers tomorrow, you got to hedge. You can't go. You can't go tomorrow without no beer.
ain't that the truth? Now, real quick, is what I want to do is we only got a couple minutes left. There's 2 things that we're going to do. The first thing is Chuck's going to have the package up for tomorrow. Coupon code.
Hey, Johnny, let me stop. Can I stop you real quick because I know you told me to make sure my package is up and I wasn't a good. I'm going to have the package up here in 30 minutes because I already know what I'm doing. I just I haven't put it up yet, so it'll be up maybe even less than that.
Well, Chuck's going to send me a text message when you see Chuck's package up. Use coupon code Chuck50. And that's going to take 50% off the package for tomorrow. Way for us to say thanks for participating in this 45-minute webinar. And now this is the good one. Chuck is a badass. He's actually kind of scary. My guess is back in the day he did the pancakes because he doesn't look like the guy that have answering the phones. Coupon code Chuck30 is going to take 30% off any long-term Chuck package. Not Chuck's actual package, but long-term package. 7 and 30 days. The footballs. This is only going to be good for 7 days. So, way for us to say thanks. And one of the things that I'm really trying to do is this guy's you know, his main love is betting for a living. This is a secondary thing for him, and I kind of like get frustrated because I know Chuck could be such a blow up in this industry because he fucking wins, and I could say fuck because I own the site and it's my webinar. Is so I'm trying the best I can to like get Chuck to understand you got to promote a little bit. You can't just load packages. So I'm gonna try my best to pimp him on a little bit because this guy is the real deal. And anybody who second guesses that, you know, name drop, ask around in Vegas, and you'll hear the truth. So I'm gonna try my best. If anyone ever wants to do anything long term with Chuck or any kind of deals to test the waters, feel free to shoot me an email at Johnny at pregame. That's what I'm here for. And Delco Donnie, and if you got to say this shit on the air, I saw your thing. How do I buy a pick for this weekend if I'm banned? Shoot me an email. You're probably still going to be banned from the forum, but I could probably unban you from buying. I just got to figure out how to do it. But I am leaving early morning to Vegas tomorrow, so there's no guarantees it can get done in the next 24 hours. So, Chuck, before we end the webinar, is there anything you want to say before we close out?
No, I appreciate the good words, and I am going to try this football season to get a little more active, maybe in the forums and stuff. I mean, I love talking sports. I mean, I'm a lot of times I'm just doing a lot of work, a lot of things going on, but I would like to talk to people in the forums, and if anybody ever has a question, feel free to on my page or in the forums, and I'm gonna get a little bit better about that here this football, and I appreciate everybody listening.
My man. I'm Johnny Detroit. He's Chuck Money. That's going to do it. And next week, so far, looks like we're going to have Vegas Runner on, not confirmed. So you know how that shit always goes. So I appreciate everybody who participated. That's going to do it. I'm the People's Champ, Johnny Detroit. He's Chuck Money. That's going to do it. And as always, from me to you, best of luck.